What if the most terrifying monster in Mesopotamian myth wasn't a monster at all? What if the chaos being that Ninurta fought was real, molten, slithering, and deadly because it was a natural force of nature? Today we're rethinking myth, exposing the assumptions of science, and asking, did the ancients witness something modern science dates millions of years too late? Welcome to Musings and Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, conspiracy theorists, interdimensional philosophers, seekers of truth, comparative mythology enthusiasts, and last, but certainly not least, all of you that desperately cling to your confirmation bias. Whether your interest is Atlantis, Zeus, or anything in between, we tackle it all from our quantumly entangled castle, tucked away in the ancient flood-battered Central Pangaean mountain range. We're the one-stop shop for mystery, history, and comparative mythology. We're a podcast dedicated to exploring the ancient, mysterious, and unknown with logic and reason, and where we also theorize the fourth dimension exists and is the spiritual. Only trigger warning for this episode is a logical conversation, so if applying the Socratic method on fringe topics is disturbing to you, turn off the podcast now. And be sure to like, follow, subscribe if you enjoy myth retellings, breakdowns, debunks, and more. And be sure to like as well. I think I said that. I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah. All right. I'm a little off my rhythm. I feel like I'm dealing with some spring allergy stuff, but it is what it is. It'll buff.
I feel like a lot of people are dealing with that.
Yeah. So if our voices sound a little different tonight, that's probably why, because, yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, over to you for your Psych Fact.
So the brain relies on shortcuts all the time. So we use what we've learned from our environment to make quick assumptions about who to trust, how to behave, and what to say. But sometimes these shortcuts aren't the greatest. So you can't always trust your brain, which is interesting.
Yeah, so these are often known as heuristics. It's shortcuts to something. So oftentimes feelings are just heuristical logic. So it's like feelings that you have are just shortcuts like on your desktop browser to a logical system of, hey, I felt uncomfortable when this dude with this particular type of cologne was around me. Therefore, I'm going to be a bit more on edge because I smell this cologne on someone else, that kind of thing. So it's logical in a sense, but it's very heuristical logic. It's automatic. It's reflexive. So no,
I think there's also something like with categorizing, like we have a tendency to categorize. So that would fall under that too.
Yeah.
Categorizing that cologne to that. So everything that smells like that is bad.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the way human psychology works, we want to see patterns in things, but and so you can sometimes see patterns in things that don't exist. But on the flip side, IQ is often equated to just being able to accurately pick out patterns in things. So you have a higher IQ and you're able to regularly detect patterns that exist in something. So you have a very dynamic way of looking at how the human mind functions and how it categorizes information. And you had said stuff about filling in the blanks as well, that the mind fills in the blanks on stuff that sometimes isn't there.
Yep.
That actually happened to me once when I was hanging out with some friends where I was sure I saw this particular store sign, and we walked up and down that street 20 times and it was not there. And I was just I feel like I'm going crazy, but it's just one of those things where, I filled in the blanks. Or was that the, what's it called? The Mandela effect.
Oh, absolutely. I love that effect.
We'll have to do an episode on that at some point, talking about that.
It's like I know there's one with the Berenstain Bears, how people spell it.
Yeah, and then there's stuff with like Fruit of the Loom too. That's always
Yes.
one that gets me because I
The
know
cornucopia.
I've seen the cornucopia. I know I've seen it.
But
yeah,
anyways,
that's a whole nother rabbit hole we won't go down today. So anywho, episode overview. All right. What are we going to be covering today? We're actually going to be going back a little bit. So we're going to start off with a wild theory on the Lugal-e that changes, that might shift how you think about the standard model a little bit. I don't know if it's going to quite change maybe everything, but if you haven't listened to episode 45 at this point, I'd recommend going back and listening to that because I'm not going to retell the Lugal-e again just for background information when that was like only 3 episodes ago. So if you haven't caught up on the back catalog, I definitely recommend that. Otherwise, maybe you've read Ninurta's feats and the Lugal-e and you're familiar with it yourself. If that's you, then by all means, plow ahead.
if you haven't, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah,
No, I'm just kidding.
You need to go get Jeremy Black's book on the myths of ancient Sumer, and you need to get Stephanie Dawley's Myths of Mesopotamia. Both are fantastic reads if you want to learn even more about what the ancients have to tell us in their stories. But that's going to be the first part of this episode. I have no clue how exactly how long that's going to take. I have a flow for it. We're going to talk about. I don't want to get into it because I don't want to spoil everything right off the bat. So we're going to do that in probably the first half of the episode or a little more. And then second batch of the episode, if you're listening on YouTube, there'll be timestamps for this. We're going to hit the Lugalbanda. It's a tale of a Mesopotamian and an encounter that this Mesopotamian person has with Anzu. So I thought this would be an interesting myth to talk about and to contrast with the conclusion we came to on Anzu himself. And then we'll have some final, just some random musings and tangential thoughts to share at the end. But that's going to kind of be the general overview. This one, it'll be a little more tangential than usual, but it's not going to be as tangential as our interview with Karen. We'll be a little bit more grounded, I think, in this one.
Right.
So,
yeah, with any guests that we have on here, I think it is just bound to be a little more tangential, and I think we said that before.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
And I think it goes without saying, though.
Yeah, if we have a guest on, it's a subject matter expert, and we're asking them questions. We're just going to go where the questions lead. So I'm sorry, user 123.
It's easy to assume.
Yes, it is
That's
easy
gonna
to
happen.
assume. No, and I do want to clarify all the tongue-in-cheek jokes we do about user 123. There's no hard feelings. It's all in good fun.
Yes, we love our listeners.
Yes, well, yeah, we love all of our listeners, even user 123, even though I don't
Yes.
think he listens anymore. But
Oh, really?
no, probably not. I think it was just the one episode because he didn't like it that much. So because he thought we were too tangential. But yeah, no, it's all tongue in cheek. We definitely love even user 123. He actually gave us some phenomenal insight that helped streamline the flow of all the episodes. So I did just want to clarify that. All right, so we're gonna start this one off with "I was wrong?" ? Because I feel like that's a good way to open the can of worms here. I was actually re-listening to episode 45 with the Lugal-e, and I was re-listening the story, and it was something that you had said about these are more metaphorical, and I was kind of thinking about it as I was re-listening to like myself retell it, which is kind of weird and sounds a little.
Can you remind me what I was saying? What specifically was metaphorical?
You were just saying that there's probably more metaphor in here than we realize, or something to that effect. Anyway, listeners can go back and listen to episode 45 and figure it out. But you had said that, and I was driving and I was like thinking about the story, and I'm like, I all of a sudden new dots started to connect for me, and I'm like, wait a second. I was wrong in trying to equate this as just, this is another Anzu tale of another demon or fallen angel falling from the sky. And I think it's important to clarify, that there's a lot of different ways you can look at these myths. And I think we have to think about them multidimensionally. And even for me, someone that's kind of used to thinking about these myths in different ways, I sometimes still get stuck in this one-dimensional way and I miss this huge insight. And so I was like re-listening to it and I'm like, oh wait, there's all this other stuff here. So
I'm glad I contributed to that.
You did, see, But yeah, so this is basically just going to be a bonus theory building off of that from the Lugal-e. I think that the battle with Asag is describing a real event that actually happened in history, and we're going to dig into that again. I don't want to spoil everything here, but all right. So Asag's description, because I was thinking about how Asag was described, and it kept bugging me that like things like Anzu had depictions, like even Stephanie Dolly's book that's sitting right next to you has a picture of Anzu in it. It might be that, it might be the other one. Anyway, one of the books has a literal picture of Anzu from like a tablet or something in it, and it was really bothering me that Asag didn't have a visual depiction of him that I could find. He also didn't really have much of a description, and that was kind of bothering me. And I was like thinking about it, and I went back and looked into it a little bit more. He's described as a youth, so like an early formation or something. He's described as slithering along the ground with dripping with sweat on its flanks. He's described as siring stone demons and leading this army against humanity. He's described as a mountain storm who has a foul smell to him. He's described as drying up rivers and leaving the earth with scars. He's described as turning fields and the ground to ash. And he stays in the mountains. Ninurta doesn't, and there's no immediate mountains in the Mesopotamian Fertile Crescent. There's the mountains to the north where you have like Turkey and all of that. So you have like Ararat, and there's several other mountains, and there's a whole mountain chain. And then you also have mountains to the east, the Zagros Mountains or the Iranian Plateau.
So basically, he's a mountain man that's not well liked and has really bad BO.
There's another way to look at it. Asag is just Bigfoot.
Just Bigfoot. Maybe that could be another theory we could get into.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely do some Bigfoot musings at some point. But there's no visual description of him. He's simply chaos, and he has all these attributes. And so, but there's a lot of different ways to think about it, as you've said. And I was thinking about it, and I realized this is a lava flow we're talking about here. It's a volcanic eruption. We have the youth. It's lava is an early formation of rock. It's rock before it's hardened.
Right.
The sweat on its flanks, again, this is where me wanting to learn and starting to learn a little bit of cuneiform was probably going to come in handy, but the dripping with sweat on its flanks, I wonder if it's just that if the cuneiform could also be read as just being liquid on its flanks or on its sides as it's expanding, it's liquid on its edges maybe even. He sires stone demons. Volcanoes create rocks. They shoot out all of this different rock material. They cause earthquakes. There's noxious fumes that are emitted from volcanoes where they reek. Dries the ground up. It's going to leave scars on the earth as the lava cuts through and rehardens. There's going to be fire that is in the sky that's coming down and burning the fields, even in faraway regions, depending on how big the eruption is. And it's going to stay in the mountain or, relatively close to the eruption, the actual quote unquote monster itself. And so I was like looking at all this, and I'm like, this suddenly starts to make a lot more sense. So that was kind of like my first clue in on all of this. And then I started thinking about the stone demons and like what these might be. And I was realizing it's not just poetic. It's probably something more to some degree. Each stone has a specific name and a character ascribed to it. And some stones are blessed and some stones are cursed. And so I was like wondering, I wonder if there's some connection between like how these stones would relate to a volcanic eruption that, I just totally lost my train of thought there. Yeah, it happens sometimes.
You'll get it back. You have your notes.
Yeah, no, but like how these stones might relate to a volcanic eruption. So like certain things might be beneficial and certain things might be not beneficial in a volcanic eruption. But there's a lot of ways you can interpret that. So there could be some confirmation bias in there. But I think a monster without form siring stone demons is kind of automatically like, hey, this is probably talking about something specific here. So I started digging into it a little bit. A lot of the stones are just not like we don't really fully know what they are. There's only a couple stones where we're sure of their specific identity, but I noticed that there was a trend. Stones that were useful for like agriculture or building things, such as diorite, are blessed. Stones like alabaster that were used for vessels of water or for making like statues or idols are blessed. And then stones like flint that are more brittle, can symbolize destruction, or used in weapons, are
Hmm.
cursed. Emery, which is often used to sharpen tools like flint and I think metal weapons as well, is cursed. And so there's a blessing of things that are used for peaceful ends, and there's a cursing of things that are used for warful ends. There's also a blessing of things, again, like diorite, where, something built of diorite is probably going to withstand an earthquake versus if you have a foundation built on flint, not so much. It's going to crumble and break apart.
Right.
So, I mean, again, many of the stones are really unidentified. It's unclear what specifically they mean. And even if it was, I probably wouldn't go into every single one because that would just turn into a really long rant. But I
It
think,
would just be a geology episode at that point.
yeah, we need to have a geologist on to talk about rocks with us. That'd be fun. But no, so rocks are falling during a volcanic or seismic event. They're erupting off of the volcano itself, being thrown. The earth is shaking. The foundation that you've built is going to be affected. All of these things are playing in, and they're all classified after the chaos. It's almost like these humans are trying to, for lack of better words, simply make sense of everything that's happened. Unless you have any final thoughts, we're going to cut to a break here real quick.
I do not at the moment.
All right. Stay tuned. And we're going to be talking about Ninurta's role and why he got involved in this volcanic eruption next. Challenging all of your preconceived paradigms and beliefs here on Musings and Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix. That is our end goal, is to help facilitate a forum, if you will, to discuss these thoughts that transcend time, going back to the earliest myths that we have records of. All right, so let's I guess we kind of had some good thoughts off the air here because we were talking about like proof of this and absolute proof. And there's no way to absolutely prove or disprove this. But I think we have to consider the fact that we have to think about myths multidimensionally, right? We have to consider all the different angles and see what best fits and aligns. And is this just the Mesopotamians writing an interesting story? Possibly. It seems kind of unlikely to me, though, because we have a very clear contrast of something without form that smells bad, that's described as having moist sides. All of these things start to build together to me. And we'll hit this in the end, but there is precedent for reading myths like these literally in accounts from like Plato. So I don't think it's outrageous to propose that this was a volcano, but I mean, it's by far definitively scientifically proven because we can't prove anything like this scientifically. That there are just certain limitations of the scientific method to analyze something like this and decide, yes, this specific volcanic eruption was told in this specific story.
I think it's really interesting that they have all of these specific details, though, that are accurate, from what you're saying, accurate to a volcanic eruption.
I might try to see if I can get someone that's, volcanist, volcano expert.
I don't
a
know if that's
Vulcan.
what it's called.
Captain Spock. Anyway, all Star Trek nerds are mad at me now because it's not Captain Spock, it's Captain Kirk. Anyway, all right. Back on track here, user 123. So Ninurta's role, talking about agriculture. So Ninurta is the god of war and agriculture, which makes sense as to why he would be interested in wanting to battle Ašag, because volcanic eruption is going to directly threaten farmlands, it's going to threaten rivers, and it's going to threaten city life. And this is his realm and domain. And all the other gods, this isn't their area of expertise. So one thing I couldn't fully wrap my brain around still was his mace, the Sar mace, where it talks and guides him, and it kind of embodies like divine judgment. And I don't know, I still couldn't figure out if there was some deeper hidden meaning behind that specifically, but I don't know, it seemed interesting.
This is gonna sound goofy, but like,
Oh, I'm all for it. Let's hear it.
okay, think about Disney princesses, right?
Okay,
They usually have a sidekick with them.
that is true.
So like
No, yeah,
Ariel, she has Sebastian and Flounder, and like Rapunzel has Pascal.
yeah.
I mean, it's just an idea, but maybe it's just kind of a companion like that.
No, that's true. And it could be. I'm not sure how much this mace is featured in all of his other myths. I don't remember reading about that in Anzu. I might just be having a memory lapse on that, though. But either way, it's food for thought as to what Ašag is, because I'm not sure how he would fit into all of this. So then I think it is interesting that Ninurta doesn't walk away. He puts the stones in order and he restores balance, if you will, after the chaos, much as like people would kind of reassess and reestablish balance after some kind of, major cataclysm. But then we have to ask, did they see it? Because the way that they're describing this lava flow, these toxic fumes, the seismic activity, environmental fallout, it seems to be pretty accurate to me for what I would expect the ancients like because realistically we have to think about this in terms of how would the ancients describe something like this. They very clearly would take it and try to encode it in their mythology. That's just how the ancients were. So if they did witness a volcanic eruption, it is going to be most likely encoded in their mythology, because it's a big event that's going to leave an imprint on their mind. And we have record of far less significant events happening in Mesopotamian culture. So I mean, we have to consider that, and then they're going to encode it in myth, and so it's gonna look like something a little bit different than how we would describe it today. They're going to put a persona and a personality to it, kind of like how we see, going back to our Disney princess analogy here, and with Moana, where you have that life, that I forget what her name is, but that island life being, and then the heart of Tafiti, is stolen, and then this lava she turns into this lava monster instead.
How can I remember? I mean, I know the answer to this, but like, how can I remember that? But
Nah.
nothing else.
No, I get it. I get it. Yeah. No, it's handy though.
It is.
Yeah, help me out. All right. But no, I think that we're looking at all this here. I don't think it's a symbolic tale. I think this is a real eyewitness account that we're looking at. It's filtered through that mythological lens once again. And so this is us peeling back the layers and getting to that deeper mythical matrix of what is truly underneath everything here, because this is pre-written, like traditionally written history. And I was reading a textbook actually about Cuneiform, and was talking about how they didn't tell history the same way that the Greeks and the Romans did in Mesopotamia. It was documented differently, and so we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and, like a lot of modern scholars do, and just say, oh, this is all myth, we just got to get rid of it all. But we can still study it from that lens. It's like, no, we can't just assume that there's no truth here.
Right.
Like that's too bold of an assumption, and I think it's very disingenuous and dismissive to these texts to approach it that way.
Now, I mean, I think it's easy to say not all of it is truth. When you hear all of this, all these stories, they're obviously going to exaggerate some details, make it out to be like this huge, grandiose thing. Yeah, but to say that there's no truth or absolute truth, I think that's a little bit far-fetched.
Yeah, and I am overgeneralizing here a little bit. I don't know if all academics would necessarily say that there's absolutely no truth in there, but that does seem to be the vibe from like what I've seen from like various professors. It's, oh, this is all just a mythology account, and we can't take this, like any form of literal,
Like it's just a
and
fictional
it's
story.
just a story, and these other stories from other cultures are just borrowing from this culture. And
Hmm.
yeah, I don't think that, when you put the rubber to the road there, that just really doesn't hold up. And I'm kind of jumping the gun on the next episode, which I'm actually very excited about. We're going to be talking about myth stealing, which will be fun. But
Well,
anyway,
it makes me think about it's taking the easy way out. To chalk it
yes.
up to that every single time, and I'm wondering when that excuse is going to run out in academia.
Well, right, because then too, we've already figured everything out about the past by modern science. We
Mm.
know how old these rocks are and all these volcanic eruptions are because our dating methods are flawless. And so we don't need to rethink the past, or we don't need to even consider the idea that these ancients might have something to say.
Hmm.
But I beg of you as the listener, if you're not already on our side of this, but how incredibly arrogant is that to look and be like, oh, our methodology is so sound when we have forensic science where we can't even get something right within the same year. We can't even use forensic science to put the right person in prison. How can we like look back and be like, oh yeah, millions and years ago, we know this eruption happened at this point. And it's like, really? And again, if you're just joining us and you're getting infuriated because you believe that radiometric dating is very reliable, go check out episode 17. We broke that down very intricately to provoke some of you that might be a little bit biased towards the standard model.
But to refuse to continue to question modern science,
Is not scientific.
it's not scientific, but it also inhibits your ability to advance technology for the future. You're staying in a very closed mindset, and you're staying in this, box of thinking. You're not thinking outside of the box then.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to at least think about other things and not be set in your ways.
No, I agree entirely. I think that, and this was my journey too, where I started off in high school, early college as a literal 6-day creationist, 6,000-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible is absolutely true. And then I walked away from that for a while, and ultimately I came back to it, maybe a slightly modified version of that. But I kept questioning, I kept digging into the methodology and to the truth. And I think that, there is a huge trust for experts in our society, and that's not necessarily a bad thing to trust the experts to some degree, but the experts do make a lot of assumptions in their field sometimes, and there is a certain point where that testing, observation, repeatability, and predictability ends, and assumptions begin, because you have to make assumptions at a certain point when you're talking about the past. Yes, there's limitations.
There's limitations to every study you do, and we see this, I'll say psychology, because every journal article I read, there's a limitations section.
Yes.
And they have to write what the limitations are to let the readers know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's with every single study that you have. There is no perfect study. There is no perfect way to question anything, really.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous to assume absolute truth for, something that science wants to claim. And I mean, we're getting a bit off topic here, so we're going to take a quick break here, and then
I feel like it was my fault.
No,
So
it's okay.
User 1, 2, 3.
We got to have some good tangents every once in a while, and we did warn him. So if user 1, 2, 3 is listening and he's mad, it's his own fault at this point, because he was warned. But no, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about volcanism, volcanic history coming up next, and we're going to propose some places where this potential eruption actually could have been that the Mesopotamians saw.
Ooh.
And then dig into some biblical connections, and then challenge the scientific model a little bit more, actually, because that was already on my agenda to do. So
Nice.
we jumped the gun once again, but stay tuned, and we will be back in just a moment. Always asking, what if you could be wrong? Here on Musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix. We are not comfortable with the standard model answers and just leaving it as is. We have to constantly question and pursue that deeper knowledge here. And that is our goal in our end state. And if you're with us on that journey, we thank you for bearing with us here and for having the grit to do so. And if you're not quite there yet, then that's all right. But we invite you to continue listening. So what's the worst thing that could happen? Listening to us. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad rabbit hole to say. A lot of worse things could probably happen with listening to us.
I am not going to answer that.
We're a little bit off the wall sometimes, but that's all right. You got to be a little bit off the walls. But anywho, let's talk about where this potential volcano could have been. The myth just really identifies Ašag as being in the mountains. It looked like there could be some affiliations with where the mountains were described as being out to the east. So again, aligning up with the Zagros or Iranian plateau. People that are listening, you can pull up Google Maps and you can look up these terms. I'm pretty sure Maddie will probably be doing the same. I don't know, maybe not. If you want a visual guide, you can Google Iranian plateau or Zagros Mountains and where those are. But it's the east of that Fertile Crescent.
Yeah.
And then another potential location is it could also be to the north, which is where Ararat, Mount Tenderek, and others are located. And that's kind of like in that Turkey, Georgia, the country, not the state, region. Those places. Those are really only the two good options for something being, quote unquote, in the mountains to the Mesopotamians. So let's talk about both of those regions, because in present-day Iraq, present-day Iran, the region does include some ancient volcanoes like the Bosman volcano, and it's part of a specific volcanic arc. And there are some studies out there talking about how it had activity that peaked during the Eocene epoch, which I'm not too familiar on my standard model time frames, but that was pretty long ago, I think, the Eocene. I want to say probably like 50,000, maybe more. But
do you want me to fact check that?
Yeah, you can fact check it. Sure.
How do you spell it?
Eocene. And then epoch, Epoch. So, I mean, this was from one article that I found, but there's no historical or geological record of volcanism at Bosman. There's some formal fumarolic activity.
What?
Gas and steam emissions. So even recent times, Bosman has had some gas that it's emitted.
Do you want me to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Go for it.
So Eocene, based on, I'm guessing, this would probably be the evolutionary model, but
yes, definitely.
55.8 to 33.9 million years ago.
Okay, so very, very long time ago.
A very, very, very long time. Yeah.
Yeah. There's other mountains to consider as well. Ararat has actually had the most recent eruptions where Noah's Ark came to land. It was around 2450 BC, supposedly, and that there's others in that region, probably from the same volcanic archetype, like Mount Tenderek, and there's others that would have had older eruptions from 10,000 to 300,000 years ago. But again, how do we know this? At a certain point, there is nothing to cross-check our dates with, and that is very dangerous to just assume that we are 100% sure that this erupted on this particular date, or even within a reasonable margin of dates, if there's nothing to compare it to. I think we do have to be careful of that, and there is a certain point, where we're assuming that these rates of decay are not affected, and that there's not some more exponential rate of decay than we realize, and we're assuming the right amount of parent-daughter isotopes when the rocks first formed. There again, go listen to episode 17 if you're getting angry right now. You can go rant on that episode. But there are a whole slew of assumptions that go into something like this, where it's like, we can kind of from one theory propose this, but how do we know for sure?
Again, there are limitations.
Yeah,
everything.
So I think it's I think of them all, Ararat would probably be, from all of these dates, Ararat is a pretty solid guess. But so it could be talking about Ararat, but again, we're assuming that all these other dates are wrong, but some of these dates might be a bit sooner than we think. And we also have to keep that possibility in mind. So, it could really be any one of these. And I don't think we can easily narrow that down, but there are certainly volcanoes in the region that did erupt and could have even potentially erupted. So let's talk about a biblical parallel, actually, that happens in a section of scripture that I think some people overlook. It's in Genesis 10:25. It says, "In the days of Peleg, the earth was divided." So, on the surface, this doesn't seem to be communicating much, but some biblical scholars actually propose that divided was like the earth in turmoil, or that there were like earthquakes going on at this particular point in time. So it could, in theory, be even referencing things like tectonic shifts or global seismic events. So it's things like a massive volcanic eruption or an earthquake disaster could very easily fit around this time frame, with the Mesopotamians uh, synergizing together with this account from Peleg. So it puts tentatively this eruption, I think reasonably, it's safe to guess if there was an eruption, it was anywhere from 2000 to 6000 BC, which is well within the range of Mesopotamian civilization and oral tradition, because we have Mesopotamian writings going all the way back to 3000 BC, right around that tipping point. I think slightly older, some more recent finds. And then as well, it's theorized that the Mesopotamians people group could have been there by the academics anywhere from, I think, like just shortly before they started to write, all the way to going back to like 8000 BC. So this would very clearly be within the Mesopotamian chain of oral tradition and memory to put this down into a mythology account and to encode it and such, especially if there were multiple disasters that happened and they lost the ability to write or didn't have the ability to write, and they just communicated orally and told it in story form so that their kids were more likely to remember their past. You very easily could end up with this, being a real volcanic event that's happening. But yeah, so I mean, there's fatal assumptions to kind of hit a summary here. There's fatal assumptions, I think, to the standard model to just assume we know for sure the date of something in particular that we're talking about here, such as no daughter isotopes present at formation, assuming no contamination over millions of years, which I think is a very bold assumption to make, assuming that decay rates have never changed. We've only measured the decay rates over the span of like 100 years or 200 years. And we're assuming that these decay rates don't have some kind of an exponential drop off at a certain point, and that there's not some other drastic fluctuation that can happen. So there are questions in this, and I know they'll probably, again, people are probably riled up. That's okay. We're here
It's okay to be riled up.
We're here to provoke thought. We're here to challenge paradigms in a friendly way, where we use the Socratic method to play, just different sides.
Hey, if you disagree with us, we'd love to hear from you.
Email us at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. Tell us how wrong we are. Many times have I said that on the show. Anyway.
I mean, the whole beginning of this episode is proof that we're okay with admitting if we were wrong.
Yeah, the literal episode
being wrong.
I was wrong.
So
I've been wrong before. I will be wrong again. It's how you learn and grow, and I'm not scared of it. And anyway.
Yes, exactly.
But not many people have emailed in. I did actually get some good listener comms from one listener that he sent me some stuff talking about the Book of Enoch. So I've bookmarked it for a later date because I want to talk about it when we get there. But no, I definitely, I take listener comms very seriously. If you email me with a good, intellectually honest critique, I will look at it and I will think it through. And if I need to correct myself on the show, I will. But
that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean,
sorry, that's all I had to say.
No, you're good.
It's exciting.
I thought you had something else to add.
No.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, no. So I think to kind of to recap everything here, the Lugal-e might not just be a myth. I think that it might be a memory distorted into myth. And the question is, which mountain? And we may never know. And I think that's okay, because I proposed an idea here that actually some other, because I had this idea on my own, and then I dug into it some more. Apparently, some other academics have also had this idea. So there are some scholars in the academic field of, I think, Assyriology that have had this same thought and proposed a similar idea to the conclusion that I came to. And I think that speaks that these myths that we're looking at here, they speak a universal truth if you're really willing and ready to listen. And there is a truth deep down. There is that myth. There is that faint twinge of that mythical matrix that we're always trying to identify. And you just have to be willing to set aside your biases and be like, what is this myth? What could this myth actually be trying to tell me? Is it just a moral story? Is it just something to entertain kids by the campfire? Or is it a retelling of history just in that fish story format where it got bigger and bigger each time it was told?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Or the classic game of telephone.
Exactly. So we do have precedent for stuff like this happening as well. And again, I will highlight this because it's in the Critias and Timaeus dialogues where we get our Atlantis discussion. I cite this how many times on the show. But again, this was a huge premise for me when I started diving into stuff like this, where I was like, oh, the Egyptians are literally saying that, hey, Helios, the sun god legend, coming too close to the earth, and like that. The whole story, I'm butchering this right now. I did not prepare to retell this. But it's like Helios' son, S-O-N, took the sun, S-U-N, chariot, and rode it too close to the earth, and it scorched the earth, is more or less how the story goes. And this Egyptian priest is telling this Greek guy, Solon, this story, and he's like, hey, you guys have this encoded in your mythology, but this is actually a true event that really happened. It was a declination of bodies, like heavenly bodies, like like asteroids, planets, that kind of thing. So we have precedent for this type of experience to be encoded in mythology, where the ancients would take things like stuff that happened in the stars and they would encode it in their myths as actual figures. And so we have to read myth that way, but we also have to read myth considering that, hey, these people might have actually been real people as well. And again, I'm going to highlight some of this in the next episode, where we're going to really dive deep into the myth stealing topic. I've been listening to a Yale professor's lectures, and then all the way so one end of the extreme, all the way to reading Zechariah Sitchin's the Lost Tablets of Enki or whatever. Yeah, that
It was rough.
Yeah, I didn't. That book infuriated me, but I'll explain next episode.
Yeah.
All right, I think we are gonna take a pause here, and we're gonna switch gears after this break. And we are going to talk about the story of Lugalbanda and his experience with the Anzu bird, because I want to retell this and contrast it to what we've highlighted about Anzu and our conclusions on Anzu. So we hope you stick around, because we will return in just a moment. Riling those of you up that adhere to the standard model. Here on Musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix, we're here to provoke thought, all in the pursuit of knowledge and truth. So no hard feelings meant, and we hope that you feel the same. All right, so we're going to talk about Lugalbanda and the stories. We're going to do segment overview here. I'm going to start off with retelling the story, of course. It's going to kind of follow our standard format, if you will. And then I'm going to talk about heroic and historical parallels. I think there's an interesting parallel to make that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I think it's still a fun history highlight to kind of hit. And then we're going to dive into mystery of the Anzu bird a little bit more, and then we're going to do mythological recap from everything on the episode, key takeaways, random tangents, and then be done with the episode. All right, so jumping right in here to Lugalbanda Retold. Lugalbanda he's a commander under King Emerkar, and he becomes really sick as they're marching off to war through the mountains. And they're going to a mountain city of Arata. And Lugalbanda becomes just so sick that he can't continue the journey. So what they do is they leave him behind in a cave with food and supplies, and they're like, hey, we've got to keep going. Hope you make it, sir. If not, then tough, the gods will have their will either way. and at least you'll go peacefully if this is your time to go. So he's kind of left there for a while, and he has some weird kind of like dreams and visions involving the gods and like what to do for them. And as he's praying to the gods, of course, and he gets miraculously healed, even though he's near death. And he has a dream to make like a feast for the gods through sacrifice, and so he does that, and things go well for him. And he goes deeper into the mountains instead of immediately going off on the journey to try to reunite with his comrades. And he encounters the Anzu bird, or rather, the Anzu bird's nest with its young in it. And Lugalbanda sees it, and he has a plan. He's like, you know what? I'm going to take good care of the Anzu bird's chicks while it's away. I'm going to nurture them. I'm going to build the nest. I'm going to make it stronger and better so that when the Anzu bird comes back, it's going to, show kindness to me because it's recognized as not just being a mortal type being. And so he builds this like elaborate nest for it, and the chicks are basically living like kings in their own right. And Anzu turns away, and at first Anzu is very apprehensive and cautious because the nest has been so disturbed and its young don't immediately respond. But then it sees the improvements done to the nest and how the young were taken care of. And it calls out into the surroundings because Lugalbanda's not right there immediately. And it's like, hey, whoever did this, show yourself. If you're a deity from above, let me have a conversation with you. And if you're a mortal, then let me decree a destiny for you, for this thing that you've done. Like, I want to know who did this. Like, what's going on? Like, who's involved? And so Lugalbanda presents himself before Anzu, and he kind of flatters Anzu a bit and talks about its sparkling eyes and all of these things. And Anzu decides to bless Lugalbanda and gives him supernatural speed and like stamina. So kind of like maybe vaguely similar to the Flash from DC Comics. And so Lugalbanda then returns to the army, and he becomes a strategic asset to King Amakar, gaining fame because of the abilities that he's received. And so he's able to catch up with his troops in record time and go off and do all these feats and earn a name for himself. And then the Anzu bird, before he departs, actually cautions him, like, hey, you probably shouldn't share this story with anyone. Because, like, basically, I think the mentality there is like, hey, I don't want other people showing up and, like, asking for the gift of speed. So that's the story. I think an interesting parallel to this, and this wouldn't be an actual mythological parallel, but I think it's still cool to highlight, is that Hannibal of Carthage, who I've talked about before, the Carthaginian Empire, and this is fast forwarding to Second Punic War. My earlier history is a little rough. I want to say 300 to 50 now, it was before Julius Caesar. Several hundred BC, like maybe 300 BC-ish. I'm guessing on the fly here. The history buffs are going to be mad at me.
I'm not going to know.
Yeah. You fact check me when the Second Punic War was.
When was the Second Punic War?
Yeah.
Okay.
But this sounds very similar to like Hannibal of Carthage when he's crossing the Alps and he actually loses like his eye, like his one eye, because of an infection that happens. And so, it sounds very similar to what happens to Lugalbanda, where he goes on this perilous journey through the mountains, he suffers a bodily affliction, and he comes out of it a legend. Second Punic War, go.
218 to 201 BCE.
Okay, so I wasn't too far off to say 300 to 200 BC, actually.
You weren't.
I was spot on. I need to not second guess myself as much.
Yeah. You're smart.
Yeah, well, thanks. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Well, yeah, so no, it's clearly not the same event, but I do think it's an interesting highlight and parallel that we do have this similar motif pop up in actual documented history from the Romans, who did indeed document history very accurately, that Hannibal kind of goes through a similar experience to Lugalbanda. And so I think it does highlight that. I think it highlights the struggles that would happen in ancient times when you were like on the move and when you were in camp, and that there was a lot of infections and they didn't know what germs were. So you had a lot of dysentery and things like that going on. So, getting an infection, getting sick and dying on a movement was not uncommon in ancient times. Like losing your eye due to an infection, not uncommon because your hands are dirty and you touch your eye and then boom, your eye is gone.
I mean, wasn't it even up until like the Civil War, they would like amputate right there
Yeah.
and
No.
like use the same tools on like other soldiers and everything.
Yeah. So that you're absolutely right. Germ theory was discovered just shortly after the Civil War. I want to say
Yeah.
1870s. And there's one, I forget the name. There's one medical doctor that was heartbroken because he's like, had I known this, 10 years ago, I could have
Yeah.
saved like a million, like no joke, like a million lives.
Mm-hmm.
But literally what they would do is it would just be, if you got shot it would pretty much just be amputation of that particular limb, and then rinse it off in some lukewarm water, and then saw off the next person's leg. And it's incredibly gory. And it's like, yeah, it's surprising not everybody that went through that died, and that there was anybody that survived that stuff from gangrene and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
You mentioned that he was sick and like all that, and it immediately made me think, what if that was all just a big fever dream?
it could be, because he prays, and it's this really weird experience where he kind of like has a vision of doing all this stuff for the gods, and then he wakes up and he hasn't actually done it, and then he goes out and does it, and then the gods show him favor, kind of thing. So you do have to wonder. It vaguely reminds me of like the kind of like vision that I had, some years back, and it's like, okay, like I could see something like this happening tentatively. Again, I don't know how much truth there is buried in all of this, but it is an interesting story. But my premise, not my premise, but my interest in this here is more to look at the Anzu comparison itself. And so I really want to dig into this here, because we see a very different depiction and description of Anzu than we do in Ninurta's battle against Anzu, where Anzu is actually slain in the battle against Ninurta. But yet we have here another Anzu bird, but that it doesn't fit the motif of the original Anzu bird that we see highlighted. This bird is kind, it's protective, it's divine. It has the ability to kind of decree a destiny, which is something that's more reserved for the deities and gods, if you will. So there's a divine aspect to this bird where it's not just a bird. There is something more to it. But we still have to ask, how does this all fit together? Is this just the name and the role of Anzu evolving over time naturally in the mythology? Is it a different cherubim? Because we theorized in our episode 43 that Anzu described there is actually a cherubim, and it's Satan as the cherub falling from heaven. So is this just a different cherub, with the same name? Or is that just what they called cherubs? Or is it a different creature altogether? Is it that kind of evolving of myth where we have initially it meant cherub, and then it started to mean dragon and bird, or vice versa? And we have this name that we would associate for various different entities, and this is just a different entity we're talking about. Is it distorted because it's seen through a different cultural lens? Like, is there a different like cultural time period way of looking at the Anzu bird when, the first Anzu myth was written versus when this one was written, or vice versa? I didn't look at the dates on this. I probably should have. So I'm not sure which one came first, but
Do you want me to fact check?
Nah, it's okay.
I
think either way, it still stands, is that, one of these was probably written at a very different time than the other. And so considering that, just provoking that thought. But yeah, no, and again, like, how does this fit with the idea of Anzu being created early on in the world's formation, like the first Anzu tale highlights that we've studied? In this one, the Anzu bird actually calls himself a prince, and again has the ability to decree destiny. So it has this idea of being divine, or having some kind of divine traits to it. But if it's a cherub, how does it have young? Like, where are the kids coming from? Like, baby cherubs running around. Is like they're floating around on clouds with, bow and arrow and shooting people in the heart, making them fall in love. Like, what are we looking at here? I was going for Cupid.
That's cute. Yeah, Cupid.
I know. I was going for a joke.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
not trying to sound stupid, but apparently it fell on deaf ears. That's fine.
It's not a stupid joke. It's me not understanding, but it's fine.
That's fine.
Our listeners will understand.
Our listeners are probably just like, man, he just needs to shut up and just tell the facts and not try to joke. Anywho, but I think my gut reflexes were probably talking about a slightly different entity, and I think we're kind of seeing a blend of mythology evolving as to what the Anzu bird was, where there was the remembrance that it's a divine entity, and that's how it's retold in stories, but we actually have a different creature appearing here. And that's kind of what my gut reflex is on what we're actually looking at the Anzu bird. But either way, this is something that's very polar opposite from what we see in the Tale of Anzu, and I think it adds a lot of intrigue and provokes a lot of thought into what like these distorted fragments might tell us about that original myth or mythical matrix. So I don't really have a conclusion on like what this absolutely is. I mean, I have a lot of theories that I hold pretty strongly to, and a lot of myths that we talk about, but I really don't have a strong opinion on this one. I could see it being pretty much any particular way, where it could be just another cherub, it could be a distorted memory, it could be, you know, oh, cherub was originally what it meant, and now it means dragon or something like that, or serpent or something like that. So I just wanted to talk about this to kind of contrast my own idea with Anzu. Like the reason I'm putting this out there is because I don't just want to present to the listeners my opinions that, oh, Anzu is Satan, that's it, end of discussion, I'm right, you're wrong, period. It's no, I am very convinced that this is true, and I'm going to assert this and be like, yes, like as much as I think we can prove this, I've proved it, you know, which is a very loose term in terms of what we're talking about here. But
it's a very interesting theory.
Yeah, but I also want to present counters and potential counters to that theory, and to play with these ideas for the listener so that you can hear, okay, where I'm not familiar with Mesopotamian myth, but what supports or doesn't support your idea. And so I just want to lay out all, you know, the information as much as I reasonably can on the show so that it can be talked about. Because again, this isn't just supposed to be me talking to you as the listener. It's a place where I want to provoke deeper thought from the listeners as well. And I want to get those listener interactions so that we can go down some rabbit holes that you as the listener want to go down. So do you have anything else to add from all of that? Any other amazing insights that you have?
Well, I don't know if they're amazing. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's important that you look at the opposite sides, like you were saying, to contrast your own ideas. I mean, think about scientifically creating theories. You have to look at everything else before creating your own theory.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. And I think
that's how you get no ideas.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we have to be willing to consider that, you know, we're wrong on certain things. And I'm okay with that. So that's kind of the intent here, is just to be like, not necessarily that I'm wrong, but I want to put out some different information so you as the listener have a more informed, broad aspect to make your conclusions. Speaking of conclusions, let's hit the overall summary of the episode that we've been talking about here. And then we're going to hit some final thoughts. I have some random things I'm going to throw out there that I think are fun for conversation.
Heck yeah.
And then we'll do closeouts.
Do we have any housekeeping things?
That's kind of housekeeping.
Okay.
Not quite. Not really particularly housekeeping.
Do your thing, babe.
Okay. So overall, in summary, we've kind of broken down the Lugal-e a little bit further. We've recapped that it was likely a volcanic eruption that happened, and we can't be sure where specifically it happened, but that seems to fit with what the text says and how the text fails to depict Ašag as actually being a specific, like, entity of any particular form. All the descriptions match up. It seems to be talking about a volcano.
Just wanted to clarify that we're also not saying 100% that this is a volcanic thing, where it's a theory.
I'm like 95.34% sure, but
yes.
it is a theory. I have no way to prove it, really.
Yeah.
And there is no way to prove anything about these myths. And that's where the fun of it is because you can speculate like crazy. And everything we talk about is, of course, speculative. But I think that I can lay out, this isn't the most convincing line of reasoning I've had for a theory about myth, but I think that I think we can lay out very convincing lines of reasoning to be like, yeah, this is the most probable course, so I'm going to adhere to this. And so I'll get strong opinions about stuff when I dig into it, because it's like, yeah, I see all of these dots connect, and I'm very confident that this is the right direction. But yes, with the stone demons as well, that this connects to the idea of volcanism. Ninurta's victory restores order to the chaos. It's the deity of farming that steps in. That's like, hey, I need farming, so I'm going to wage war to protect my domain. And then we switched gears after that, and we talked about Lugalbanda's story and how we retold it. We talked about the echoes of what we see with Hannibal, and then we talked about the Anzu bird and what this might mean as to what the Anzu bird is defined. So, I think oftentimes what seems like a legend might just be history in disguise. And we have to approach all of these things with that lens. So even Stephanie Dawley in her book identifies the Anzu bird in other myths as a thunderbird, which I think is an interesting translation nuance. And as I'm looking into more cuneiform, it seems like there's a bit of divergence that's available in what one person might translate to what the next person might translate for the same phrase. So, concluding thoughts overall, and then we'll hit some other ramblings and musings. Drop a comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Does the volcano theory fit? Does that change anything about dating methods? Do you think the dating methods still hold and this theory could be true? Drop a comment below on YouTube or shoot us an email if you want to hear your thoughts bounced around a little bit on air potentially. Be sure to check out our previous deep dives as well. We've done a lot in Mesopotamian mythology. We've done some biblical tangents recently. We did a very interesting episode with Karen. We talked about the biblical genocide issue. Was it really genocide? What was going on there? Laid out a very interesting line of thought from what the biblical texts actually say. And we're kind of all over the place recently, but I like that. We've got to have a wide subject base. Can't get too focused. But I mean, it's good to be focused some because we've been doing a deep dive into Mesopotamian myth, and that's been fun. But I think it's good to.
You don't want to get too narrow-minded.
Yes, the intent of the show is to be broad, and we do deep dives for a while on a subject, and then we move on. So
you can only deep dive so much on one thing.
That is true. It's very true. So, all right, some final just things I wanted to kind of throw around in the air here that I think would be kind of fun to talk about is, so Harambe, the gorilla in like 2016, right?
That brings back memories.
Yeah, no, but like, as I saw something really interesting on the internet recently where I was talking about how a lot of people like millennials and Gen Z look at that and they kind of see that as just the marking of the decline of Western society almost, in a sense where it's everything was downhill from there. And so I kind of had this thought in my head. I'm like, I wonder if there was like a Roman Harambe for like the Roman Empire. Like if there was some particular event where it's like, yeah, this elephant that we all really loved that was in the gladiator rings like just died, and then everything went downhill from there and the Goths invaded and the empire collapsed.
It all started with Harambe.
Yeah. I do think there was a Byzantine symbology though, actually, which is because okay, backtrack here because again we're going off on random tangents. So the Roman Empire collapsed 300 to 500 AD-ish. I'm guessing again.
Do you want me to fact check?
You can fact check. I'm probably pretty close.
You said the Roman Empire?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the Byzantine Empire fragmented off of that and went on for much longer. And I think that fell around 1500. But it was interesting because their capital was Constantinople. Now it's modern day Istanbul. And you actually play there if you play Assassin's Creed Revelations, where he goes to Istanbul. That's Constantinople, Istanbul. Roman Empire, go.
The Roman Empire. It says fall of the Western Roman Empire, so I don't know if that means anything, but
yes.
476 AD.
Okay, yeah, so about 500 AD. I need to stop second guessing. But
with
yes.
How much you research, it's. Again, I don't want to say safe to assume,
but I'm not as up on I call that more recent history because I like the deep fringe past history of like ancient Sumer and all of that. So I'm not as up on the more recent history date. So I'm surprised I'm getting all of these right.
Because you know your stuff. You just need to stop second guessing yourself.
It's a byproduct of having a dad with a PhD in history. You just learn history by like osmosis. You just absorb it into your mind. Just telepathically transmits. Anyway, Byzantine symbology. So there was the Byzantine Empire. I think it was like around 1500. Maybe
you want me to look that up?
No, we'll just leave it for the listeners.
Trust your instincts. Trust it.
Yeah, we'll say around 1500. The Byzantine Empire collapsed and Constantinople like officially fell. But I think there was some saying or something that they had where it was like, as long as the moon shines, our city will not fall. Go ahead. You looked up the Byzantine fall, didn't you?
I did.
Was I wrong on this one?
No. 1453. You're really close. So again, stop second guessing yourself. I did that on purpose.
Oh boy. All right.
Continue. I'm sorry.
Right. Nope, you're good. No worries. But no, so they had this like this belief that their city wouldn't fall as long as the moon was visible. And then when Constantinople fell, the moon there was like an eclipse or something that happened, and then the city fell, which I think was
That's
like
odd.
was really interesting. Particularly in contrast to this idea of like a Roman Harambe elephant, where the Western Roman
That's
Empire falls because of
That's kind of creepy if you think about it. Like unsettling
yeah,
that they said that and then it happened.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
weird. I don't
know. It was something interesting that I wanted to kind of like play around with. So I mean, let me know if you've studied Roman Empire in depth, because that is not one of my subjects that I've been as interested in over the years. So if you've studied that in depth and then you found a Roman Harambe, please let me know. I'm curious if it exists, or if it was just the invasion of Goths. Like, I don't know. Anyway,
invasion of what?
Goths. The Gothic people is like a Germanic tribe.
Oh yeah.
Not like goth chicks like people think about nowadays. Is like it was a brutal tribe of Germanic people. And
gotcha.
they invaded, and the Roman Empire just kind of, it had a whole bunch of, I think, internal structural integrity issues, like internal political failures and all of that. And then the army became more dysregulated. They stopped using all of their armor and kind of got lax with their phalanx formations, which was their strength. And it just kind of collapsed because of that. And then the Byzantine Empire reformulated to the Eastern Roman Empire, and was salvaged and endured for another millennium, basically.
So that's why the Western
Yes.
portion mattered. Okay.
The Western Empire was Rome proper, like the Roman Empire proper. What
like
people
actually
think
Roman. Okay.
when I say Rome and Roman, what people think of, like, people wearing the helmets and like the red on top of the gold and the big shields and the spears, which those spears are pretty cool. I have one. It's pinnacle of weapons technology.
Chef's kiss.
Anyway. Another interesting one. I saw someone post this question. So like the rule of vampires, right? Like they have to be like welcomed in.
This is really random.
Yeah, I know. I have some random thoughts I just wanted to talk about.
So vampires.
Yeah, Roman Empire. Anyway, vampires.
Continue. I'm sorry.
But no, so like vampires. Like if vampires are real, like let's suppose that, and how they have to be invited in, right? Like they can't just enter your home; they have to be invited in. Like I saw someone
garlic.
and then like crucifix and everything too. But I saw this. Someone had posted this on social media, but it's like if there was a vampire police officer that had a warrant, could they enter your house, or would they still not be allowed? What are your thoughts?
I mean, he has a warrant. He or she has a warrant.
Yeah. But
so he or she is invited somehow from somebody else, not exactly the homeowner. Why is this a thing?
I don't know. It's just something
Did you come up with this? Or
no, it was something I saw on social media.
Okay.
It was a question I saw on social media, so I was just
if a vampire has a warrant.
Because it's like, that would be an old, like, if vampires are real again, it's like kind of like an older sacrament, if you will, that they're not allowed to enter unless they're invited in. So would that really supersede like a judge saying like, hey, you can go in? Like, I feel like that the older law would probably hold for the vampire, where they have to, even if they have a warrant, they still have to be specifically invited in, right? Because they have to be invited by the homeowner.
Law. That's more traditional law versus
vampire law.
Yeah.
I feel like vampire law would hold stronger. So I feel like they wouldn't be able to. I feel like a warrant's not permission from the homeowner itself, which is not... Like someone else can say, hey, you can enter that home, but that's not their home, so they really have the authority there.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I don't know. Let us know. Email us your thoughts, m.quad.musings@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Can a vampire police officer enter your home without your permission if he has a warrant?
We ask the real questions here.
The questions no one else dares to ask on any other podcast. I don't know. I don't know if that makes us better or worse. I feel like probably worse, but it's all right. Anyway,
hey, at least we're having fun over here.
No, exactly. That's why I want to ask these, because I don't just want to have serious conversations. Like, I want to have some fun conversations.
I feel like I'm going to think about that the rest of the night now.
There you go. Boom.
Vampires and warrants.
There you go. Deep insight.
Sorry.
No, you're good. So yeah, one final thing I wanted to throw out, because I know I had said that like I was going to stay away from cuneiform because like in Sumerian, because Westhoff couldn't figure it out, but I actually decided, and I did it. I got a textbook for, it's a manual of Sumerian grammar and texts, and I'm actually going to try to figure out how to read and maybe speak a little bit of ancient Sumerian. So it's a very, very cool language. So I did want to kind of rant about it just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
So it's logosyllabic. So what it is it's based off of the syllables you say, not an alphabet. So the characters represent a particular sound that you would make, like la, li, lo, gu, ga, and that kind of thing. A particular syllable rather than an alphabet of 26 or however many characters constructed together to make words.
So like phonics.
Yeah, it's basically like a phonics system really boiled down.
Yeah.
Which I loved when I was like in kindergarten, first grade. Like I had phonics as a subject in homeschool, and I loved it. So I was looking at this and I'm like, this just seems like so like modular, like it's almost like Legos but languages, and like this looks so cool. So I was like kind of digging into it a little bit. I'm like, I just need to just try to see if I can pick up some of this, because I probably can pick up a little bit at least. I've scratched the surface of very cursory web knowledge on cuneiform, and I don't want to. There's a lot of really cool insights, I think, that I'm actually going to be able to bring to the table about various mythology topics we've talked about, but I don't want to say any of them because, again, it's just cursory web searches and digging into some loose information that's not really super academic. But I think that there's a lot of nuances in translation where a lot of things, there's actually very deeper dimension, even deeper than I expected, actually. Because I know we have planned a whole problem of translation episode, and I think I'm going to have, if I can learn enough by then to kind of delineate some of these things and read enough of these scholars' opinions, I'll probably have a ton of interjections for that to be like, hey, we actually said this, but it's actually this and this. There's a lot of other cool things. One other interesting thing about the Sumerian language. So cuneiform and Sumerian aren't the same thing. Cuneiform is the writing form. Sumerian was what the Mesopotamians in the region generally spoke primarily, and then it went to Akkadian, which was more of Akkadian's a Semitic language, and then it evolved to other languages like I think Babylon had its own language. Maybe they use Akkadian. Anyway, the Hittite and other like Persian, other languages as well adopted it. But cuneiform was an alphabet. Alphabet's the wrong word.
Phonics system.
A phonics system, writing system for all of those different languages.
Oh.
So it gets really
So it was like a universal thing.
Right. So
quote unquote universal.
Yeah, for the region.
Yeah.
Where it was an efficient writing system that was adopted even when the Sumerian language itself died out, because it's a dead language. So we don't know, like, I can attempt to speak it like Latin, but we don't know for sure how it would have sounded. Like Latin, because Latin's also a dead language. We can make very educated academic guesses on it, but it is, there's no way to reconstruct it to be sure. So, but yeah, no. So the cuneiform Sumerian is very interesting because it's there's all these really weird grammatical terms, and I don't like the grammatical terms because they're just very academic and sterile, and they're just boring, and they confuse the crap out of me. But what it really boils down to is that with cuneiform, like Sumerian cuneiform, there's like, if we say the boy kicked the ball in Sumerian cuneiform, you could read that. No, if I say the boy kicks the ball, so like present tense or future tense, it could be the boy kicks the ball or the ball kicks the boy. It could be read either way. Oh. And so you have to read broader context of the sentence, and you have to understand like the order of this stuff. But what's interesting is for past tense, that doesn't exist, where there's a specific notation for like who's taking the action. That is annotated, and it's like an E sound oftentimes. So like my understand, again, this is very loose. I've only just started diving in, so I could be slightly off on this and need to correct in the next episode. But like when we say Lugal and Lugal-e, like Lugal is, I think, king, and Lugal-e is like the king is taking action.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's like that.
I wonder why they would have a specific way to say past tense, but not for present or future.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Like
But
that it could be vice versa for those, but not for past
right.
tense.
And it's just the nuance of languages where
Yeah.
it's a Sumerian's a language isolate, so there's nothing else that's really in the same family. So like
Mhm.
I'm gonna butcher this because I'm not a linguist, but like English and German actually have stuff in common. So
Yes.
they would be of the same family.
A lot of languages are based on Latin.
Yeah, a lot of languages are based on Latin. So there's a huge Latin family,
Yeah.
that we have.
Spanish.
Yeah, like Spanish. I think French too, maybe.
Maybe, but
German
English also has
German is
French
not.
language in it as well, like
Yeah.
RSVP.
Yeah. So we
So-
have like families of languages, and then you have like the Oriental, Japanese, and Chinese,
Mhm.
Korean, all of those different dialects, and then you have like Arabic, Hebrew, and Hebrew and Akkadian are actually from the same general family. They're both Semitic languages, but Sumerian is a language isolate. And I was going down a whole rabbit hole of looking into all sorts of ancient languages. Like, apparently, I think it was. Here, say something smart. I'm going to Google something real quick.
So cognitive development. I was just learning about this. So there's Piaget theory, there's Erikson theory, and Vygotsky. I think I pronounced that right, but there's also other theories on that. But Piaget,
Yeah, Piaget, Erik Erikson,
yeah.
Freud.
Which, I mean, I'm trying to think. Piaget is sensory motor and then preoccipital, but I think I forget the other stages. But that one's what, the 4 stage, and then Erikson is the 8 stage.
I learned this in freshman year of college, like 9 years ago. That's how old I am. So it's all rusty to me. But anyway, thank you for saying something smart.
I mean, it wasn't that smart.
So like Linear B was the writing system for the ancient Greeks, the Mycenaeans, and it was, I think, my understanding. Again, I've only kind of loosely started digging into this, so this is loose research, but it was like logosyllabic as well, where it was based on those phonics sounds, which I think is interesting because like we also have Linear A, which is from the Mycenaeans, which was a predating culture that I think it's not been deciphered. Actually, we don't know what it says because like we can guess at what it would sound like because it's similar to Linear B, but we don't have an actual transliteration like a Rosetta Stone version to be able to be like to be able to look at it and say, hey, like we have this one language we know and this other language that we don't, so we can quantify them and translate them both together. So I think it's very interesting because it seems like initially there was a lot of logosyllabic language systems in culture that seemed to kind of be the standard. And then you started progressing more towards this alphabetic system over time being more widely accepted and used, like with English ultimately kind of, developing. And Hebrew is kind of a hybrid, actually. It's a little bit syllabic, but it has an alphabet system, where there's a specific number of characters, but it doesn't have vowels for the characters. It only has consonants.
Yep.
So, and then you can annotate those with like it's called the Nakud system. It's like little dots and lines and stuff you can see like around the Hebrew characters. But a lot of proper Hebrew doesn't have the Nakud. It's just intuitively understood that, oh, these have these vowel sounds and these don't. So that was all the random tangents I had. I'm trying to learn Cuneiform. That was just kind of really all I wanted to say. And I wanted to share about a little bit of...
Look at this hot shot.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I might like get into it and like 2 days from now, just throw up my hands and be like, you know what? I quit. But I think there's a lot of very, very cool insights to be gained. And I think a lot of it debunks things like what Sitchin promotes, which, oh my gosh, that was... It's like...
I saw your face while trying to read the book, and you looked in pain, like physical pain.
Yeah. He had a loose understanding of these various myths that we've gone over the last couple of months, and he had a very, very loose understanding of cuneiform. But it is hot trash.
It's
was
a dumpster fire.
It was bad. He just puts all of his own opinions on stuff and spins it in the ancient astronaut direction. I see no grounds for it. He offers no substantiation. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna read his work because I don't buy into this whole ancient astronaut thing, but I want to hear the side. Like
Yeah.
I don't buy it, but let's see what the evidence is. And there's no sources whatsoever in like virtually anything that he provides. It's just some obscure seals that he'll reference and be like, oh look, this is Nibiru. And it's like,
He didn't reference anything?
right next to you, the Lost Book of Enki. There's not a single source in that. It's the second one in the stack. There's not a single source in that. He makes up a scribe's name. He takes all of these Mesopotamian myths and he retells them in immediately I started reading this and I'm like, yeah, this is someone just rewriting a bunch of stuff. This isn't how Mesopotamian texts would read. This was not an original lost tablet because you've worked in banking before. You know the best way to identify a counterfeit is to see the reals. And I've seen a bunch of real Mesopotamian myths and I've read them and I've tried to decipher them. His read just so much different.
330 pages and he didn't reference anything?
Nope. I think that's the standard in his...
I feel your pain now.
Yeah, I think that like in all three of his books, I don't think he referenced anything either because I tried to see if, maybe I just have the wrong book and nope.
You know what would happen if I did that with school?
Yeah.
Or in academia?
Yeah. He just
no one would believe it.
He just vaguely references, like he'll pull up seals and he'll talk about like how a certain seal looks and then be like, oh yeah, I've read all these different texts and this is the truth. And it's like, okay, like it has that nah bro, trust me energy to it.
I'm putting this away before I get upset.
Yes. No, I was and if any of you have some interesting insights, where Sitchin does cite a source, please send it to me at mthquad.musings@gmail.com. I will take a look at it. But
yeah, if we missed that.
If I missed it, please. Like I honestly I didn't want to read it, but I got it because I'm like, you know what, let me give it a fair shake. And he introduced this scribe, which I think is like Endabar or something like that in the beginning, as like being the one that dictates everything. That from what I could find and what I like, as I looked in like the indexes for both my Mesopotamian books. I did Google searches. I did deep dives into academic documents. I could not find one mention of this Endabar or whatever he called him. This person, like I looked at the name. I tried to find him. Doesn't exist. It's a fabrication of Sitchin, and it literally just means master scribe. And he identifies this as being a son of someone else, but it's like, this person is never
he has
even
no proof of it.
Yeah, this person isn't even mentioned in Mesopotamian mythology at all. And I saw this right off the bat, and I'm just like, bro. Yeah, and I
don't know. It's okay to have opinions about things and to speculate and everything, but if you're creating things and fabricating things just to support your idea, that's a problem.
I was, because I just worked through all these Mesopotamian myths, and I think all of our listeners can tell by now, if you've been listening for more than one episode, that I'm very passionate about this subject.
Yeah.
And I was just reading it, and I was reading Sitchin retell all these myths with his slant. Like he went through and retold them all, like from the Bible. He told Adapa. He mentioned Etana. He mentioned Anzu. All these other ones. And I'm just thinking in my head, look at how he massacred my boy. The meme.
Massacred.
Like look at how he massacred my boy. Anyway, I was just. It was rough. I wanted to give it a fair shake because I'm like, I'm curious. Let me see what there actually is to offer about all of this. I do also have the Mula pin, which is it's the Babylonian star list. It's a list of star charting that like the Mesopotamians did. I think it dates back to around 800 BC, maybe even before. Again, guessing, probably right at this rate with my track record, because guessing I'm usually pretty spot on. But yeah, I'm going to dig into that a bit more because I think that mentions Nibiru, which Sitchin cites a bit, which we talked about Nibiru with the Enuma Elish.
Yeah.
So I want to dig into Nibiru a little bit more in the future, and I'll see if I find anything interesting in that star list that's worth talking about on this show. But at the very least, it'll make a good resource to kind of augment what we're talking about. So yeah, we'll talk more about some of Sitchin's work in the next. Maybe we won't actually, because I don't. There's just like, if you don't even cite one singular source,
it's not much to go on.
No, it's not. It's just he just combined all of these myths and put an ancient astronaut spin on it with zero precedent. And so I just look at this and it's like it's Yeah.
That's another thing too. If you're not using any references, you're limiting the ability for the readers to actually make their own connections. Maybe not, but it depends. It depends on the reader, I guess.
It's pretty much a, nah, bro, trust me, I read these. I figured out a way that all the other scholars haven't figured out to decipher this cuneiform text. And, this is actually what it says. And it's like, there's just really nothing to that. Like, there's just not much. So
it's very odd.
Yeah. It's
330 pages. That's odd.
Yeah. He just combined a ton of myths. He didn't even, when he combined the Adam and Eve story, he didn't even combine it as Adam and Eve. He combined it as Adam and Tiamat. Yeah, he didn't even use Eve's name. He combined it as a nickname of the previous primordial goddess from the Enuma Elish, Tiamat. So I just looked at that and I'm just like,
It sounds like he's severely misinformed.
Yeah, it's Stitchin was the first Billy Carson. I'll leave it at that. I've gone through a lot of different academic hurdles, because I want to present good information to the listeners. I don't want to present stuff that has slants or that's inaccurate. So we don't
want to push people either.
Yeah. I've gone to great ends to make sure that the information that's on the show is as true as I can, present the information. As someone that's trained in school to do, credible academic research, as are you, it's like, I was reading that book and I'm just like, I don't even feel like there's anything to talk about here. I feel like I'm just wasting my time skim reading this because it's just someone's opinion. Someone just took all these Mesopotamian myths and retold them as an interesting story. That's it. That's it. Like, they retold them as an interesting story. And I'm just like, as a fiction novelist, wouldn't be a bad piece of work. But it's like, to claim this is truth, there's just absolutely zero groundings for it. It's such a huge leap of faith. And it frustrates me because I feel like there is so much to these texts where we don't have to stretch the truth the way Sitchin does. Like, we can actually be academic and look at it and speculate some really wild things like ancient volcanoes and the original tale of Satan, falling from heaven, and looking how it compares across 4 different biblical books of the Bible.
Yeah.
We can look at things like Lilith. We can look at things like the Ark. We can ask questions. We can look at things like the Nephilim and see that there is a parallel to, the Anunnaki, like in concept potentially. So I don't know. It just frustrates me that that someone wants to come along and try to stretch the truth when, I feel like the truth is far more exciting on its own. You don't really have to stretch it to fit an Ancient Aliens agenda.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
I think we covered it, but I'm just mind blown that, again, all those pages, not a single reference.
Oh, I know.
But I know if I did that in school, no one would take me seriously.
Yeah, because no one can check his work. That's the thing. Is like, if you don't include any sources, it's just, oh, nah, bro, trust me. I know how to read these cuneiform. Here's some obscure like seals. This proves my point.
Think about creating theories in psychology. You have to reference the previous theories. You have to reference other scientific data to be able to form your own theory. You have to be able to support it at least somewhat. Yeah.
I mean, he had a knowledge of the texts. He clearly did. And he had a tiny bit of knowledge of cuneiform. And I don't know.
Knowledge is a dangerous thing.
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Anyway.
We kind of went on a rant.
Yeah, this was supposed to be like barely an hour, and it's an hour and a half. So we'll wrap up here. We'll wrap up here unless you have anything else to interject.
Use references, not Wikipedia.
Yeah, don't use.
We already mentioned that, yes. But please don't.
I'm gonna laugh at you if you use Wikipedia as a source in silent. I won't laugh on the show. Don't worry.
You know what I also found out, which I mean, it's probably obvious for some people, but not for others. But if you use like an online thing to help you cite things, like if you put in like plug in a URL and it cites it for you, please double check that, because that can also be very wrong.
Yeah, I use some of those in college for sure to get in the right APA. Yeah. What, did you find that out from firsthand experience, or did you see someone else do that?
I saw somebody else do it, but I've also witnessed it firsthand, like using, what is it, MyBib or something, which, like, I'm always cautious when using stuff like that to help me find, like, if I can't find a date specifically on the web page, I use it to see if it comes up with the date, and then I check again. But it can get a little interesting.
Yep, be sure about how you cite your sources. Nice thing with the podcast, I can just cite sources however I want. I can do it in APA. I could just do it like half-blooded. I can just put the URL.
You can literally just put the URL and nothing else.
And be like, yeah, you guys can figure it out.
Because it's not academic. You're not graded on it.
Doesn't matter. It's like, hey, the information is there if you want to do your own research, but like, I don't need to spell it out a particular way. It's nice. Anyway,
I wish I could do
that. I know. I'm sorry. So we ask that you share the podcast with someone. If you stuck around this far, you're clearly a dedicated listener to our random musings and our tangential thoughts.
We appreciate you.
Yes, we appreciate you, and we ask that you find other people that would appreciate us and that we could also appreciate, because we all need to appreciate each other very much, or we will all depreciate. Ask that you consider buying us a cup of coffee, a book, helps fund the research here. So, even just like a $2, $3, $5 donation definitely helps. Just kind of fund all the costs that go in for the equipment, the book research, the time, the effort. I put a lot of work into this, as Maddie can tell you.
Yes.
I put in a lot of work.
He does. Trust me.
If you do a $25 donation or more, you get mentioned as a producer on the upcoming show. Give us a follow on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Handles there, m.quad.musings m.quad.musings. Facebook is Musings and Mysteries, the Mythical Matrix. And then you can email us at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. I almost put the gmail.com handle in the social link. That would have been very confusing. Please send us your confessions, concessions, contentions, whatever you like about the show, whatever you don't like about the show. We want to hear from you. So email us, m.quad.musings@gmail.com. So whether you've been listening on the earth with the mortals in the stars of heaven, with Enoch and the Cheribum, or
down in Sheol,
we thank you for quantumly transcending time to join us for this epic mythology deep dive, and hope you have a good rest of your night.
Bye.